Good evening. Glad everybody could join us here this evening. My name is Ted Wiseman, Extension Educator in Perry County. Apologize here at the beginning. I'm going to be moving really quick to get through everything we need to get through. Um, so here we go. Before we do anything when we're building a fence, you want to call 811, a call before you dig. You're not going to be bothering these people, which some producers have told me they feel like they're doing. They want you to call them. You're not bothering them, because if you get into a situation like this where you cut a fiber wire or fiber line, it's thousands of dollars a day in fines if you didn't make the call. So please make that call. New fence line law changed in 2008. There's a copy of it in your manual, in your packet. There's spiral bound book that you received. It's in there. And then here's the website for the NRCS standards, what those are for fences. And then briefly just mention the purple post law. This has been on, it's not passed yet, but the legislature did look at it again last year. I don't know where that's at, but this simply means that if you want to demark your property lines, you could just take a purple paint and paint fence posts or trees to indicate that that is a property line. You don't have to buy new trespassing signs or anything like that. Again, I don't know where it's at. In the legislature, but as soon as it is passed, we'll let you know. We use the color purple. That way people that are colorblind can still see that color. So what fence you're going to have is going to depend on what kind of livestock you've got, what ages of livestock you've got. If it's horses, you need something visible. With calves, I don't like seeing them out like this. It just makes them harder to train the older they get to keep them in. They get used to going underneath that fence. If you don't have it charged or at the right height, just makes things rougher down the road. With goats, this animal can get its head in and out of that fence just fine. But if that was a horned animal, he'd either get himself hurt really bad trying to get his head back out of there, or he's going to damage your fence. So just be aware that different species, different ages have different fencing requirements. Whole host of different materials out there: woven wire, barbed wire, high tensile, whether you're electrifying or not, wood, steel, recycled plastic posts. The only thing I'll say about those is I've had producers use them, and in the heat of the summer they will bow. Okay. Chargers, probably one of the biggest mistakes that I've made and I've seen others make. Here at the Museum of Fencing done wrong, other place, you name it, I've done it wrong. But chargers do not pay any attention to how many miles they say they're on. Look at the joules. A minimum of 2 joules. If you're going to have a high tensile wire like this with 2 or 3 strands on it, I'd say a 4 joule at minimum. Okay. You can install switches to turn sections on and off. Works great. Solar chargers have gotten a lot better in the last few years. Better batteries, better solar panels. They just have a tendency to on the back 40 to get legs and walk off. These two chargers that I have here, this is a 63 joule. This is a 100 joule. This is the biggest one that I could find. I'm not endorsing anybody or any company. Just letting you know how big you can go. These are pretty pricey. I think this one's about $3 grand. Does come with the remote control though. But these chargers and other companies have them where you can get a tester with them. You can lay this metal piece here on the end right on the fence, and it'll tell you which direction the fault is. Another feature that I like at some of them have, you can lay it on your electric fence, push a button, it'll turn your charger off, make your repairs, fix your fence, do whatever you need to do, then put it back on there and turn it back on if you happen to be on the back 40. I think that's pretty slick. Charger like this may take 10 ground rods, and that's our next section. Probably along with chargers, another big mistake that I've made and others is we don't ground our chargers enough. Again, there's a nice article in your books, in your manuals, and under all this is under the paddock design, also on some watering systems that Clint talked about. So there's some information in there. But I have read 3 foot of grounding rod per joule. I would say at least 3 ground rods, no matter what size of charger you got. 6 foot, 10 foot apart, at least 10 foot is what I'd go with. And then if you've got wire that's not electrified on your fence, ground your charger right to that wire. It'll really help make that circuit work a lot better. And then in this in this particular manual that I was looking at, they recommend if you go more than 1,500 foot away from your charger, to put another ground rod in. Maybe put one on the back 40 just to help in dry years to make that circuit work better. Stray voltage, not as big an issue it used to be. Of course, we don't have as many dairies as we used to be, is where we've really seen a lot of it. But you don't want to install that charger close to your utilities where they're coming in. Kind of keep them 50 foot apart is the example they give in this fact sheet that I found. You know, especially if you got metal pipe into your water tanks, you know, it can be a conduit of electric. So just be aware. I mean, it doesn't take much less than a half a volt, and it'll affect performance of those livestock because they'll back off the water. Use the right wire, lead out and underground cables. Copper wire, we couldn't afford it to use it for electric fence anyway, but high tensile wire is designed to carry the charge on the outside of the wire. Copper carries it on the inside, and you don't want to mix the types of wires up. I once made the mistake of using a piece of copper to make a jumper in a corner to two electric wires, and the copper started corroding the high tensile wire, so I had to take it off. But you want good, clean connections. And if you are going to install some of this underground wire, especially under driveways, I'd put it through a piece of junk plastic pipe that you got just to help protect it even more. Wire types, whole different host types of these: poly wires, poly ropes, poly tapes. This poly netting has worked well for some folks here in the county. That, you know, it's only the horizontals that are electrified, but they've used them with really good success for rotational grazing with sheep and goats. It worked out well. Barbed wire, you don't want to electrify barbed wire because every time that electric comes to one of those barbs, it won't short it out, but it just kind of takes some of the juice out of it. It's kind of like imagining water flowing through a line, and then it comes to dead ends every so often. It just won't flow real good. The gripples, I'll talk about them later, but there are two different sizes of those. I've used them. They got some good points and some bad points, but we'll get to that here in a minute. Post selections, step-in post, wood post, steel post. You can use them in combinations. Here you can see they've got these steel posts with pigs inside hog panels, and probably had to put the electric fence in there because hogs, they'll root up anything. I don't care how many steel posts you got in there. They'll pull them up out of the ground and go under it. So that's probably why they had to put the electric in there. But all kinds of different selections there that you can use. Staples and staple placements, probably another big area that I've made several hundred mistakes putting these in over the years. But we have two different kinds of staples. We've got a right cut or right-handed staple, or a left cut or a left-handed staple. Most of them that I've seen around my area have been the right-handed ones. And the way you can tell is if you lay that staple on your hand, the palm of your hand, with these points sticking away from you, pointing away from your body. If that cut edge is up and is on the right side, that's a right-handed staple. Okay. The right-handed staple, you want to tilt it to about 2 o'clock or a 30 or 45-degree angle and drive that staple in. And what that does is it forces, when you drive that staple in, these barbs go away from each other, giving you a much stronger anchor with that staple than if you put it in backwards. They would cross over. And if you put the wire on the wrong side of the fence, they're going to push them right out. Okay. I really like these. I use 1.5 inch, the double board staples, especially if you're using treated wood posts. They're real soft. These seem to do a pretty good job for me, but personal preference there. Insulators, again, whole big variety of selections, colors, and types out there. These insulators, these little tubes that wrap around the end of your corner posts, they do work. The only downfall is that over time, they will start to crack. I've got some that are 20, 25 years old, and they're starting to crack and short out on the posts. So what I'm doing is coming back in and putting these bullnose insulators in. Learn how to tie high tensile wire. It's not that hard, that difficult to do, especially for these two just simple knots that you can use. The porcelain bull nose insulators probably last you a little longer than the plastic ones. They're a little more expensive. Just if you drop them on the shop floor, they don't hold up real well. That's another area here at the museum that we've done. But again, a whole different types of selections out there for whatever insulator you need, whether it's steel post, wood post, you name it. Corner post, probably the number one area that I've messed up before, and others that I've seen. You need to do it right, or you're going to be doing it over, especially if you're using high tensile wire. But for all fence, it doesn't matter. This one's close to being right. I can't really tell from the picture, but this one is installed correctly. But the rule of thumb is whatever your post height is, say this is a 4-foot post, you want 2.5 times that in your horizontal. So if it's 4 foot, we'll need a 10-footer here. And this just looks like a regular fence post, but I may be wrong. If you don't do it, if you don't have those long enough, this is what you're going to wind up with. It's going to pull that corner right out of there. Okay. There are other different ways of doing it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or indifferent. It's just what you've got to work with. And this is probably out west where they're dealing with a lot of rock. With corner posts, this one is probably about the only thing that I've done right on my place. You can see this is 10 foot, 4 foot up. But another thing that I've done is put a peg on the other side of that post. So when that gate's open, it'll hold that gate up, and it'll also keep it open. Another thing that I've done in the past few years is say the gate's coming around to this side of the post. Take another one of those old screw-in gate pegs and screw it into the post here. So when you close that gate, you can set this pipe right over top of that pin to help hold it in place. Whether you got a chain on it or not, it'll still hold it there. And another nice thing is when the neighbor kids come over and they climb over your gate and they don't climb over it on the inside, it'll keep them from bending it too, and you from having to yell at them. The double H braces here will work. Not a big fan of them. You got to make sure you got these 3 posts in line, and you got these horizontals perfectly in alignment. If you got these in the middle here, a little too high, it's going to push that post right up out of the ground. Or if you got them misaligned, it's going to push this post one way or the other. So not a big fan. Post spacing and size going to depend on the terrain, what type of fence you've got. You can space them out and use some of these spacers here. They're not on the ground. Fiberglass or wood won't short out your fence. Again, just going to depend on the fence type and the terrain. Fence tension, different kinds of tensioners. There's the ratchets. There's 2 different kinds out there. This one, you can just put a wrench on it. Some of the others are rounded on both sides, and it takes a special tool to tighten them up. Here's another gripple again. Takes a special tool to tighten them. The only downfall I have of these is I've got some between the pasture field and the hay field, and a couple strands of electric fence on it, and deer can't see the electric fence, and they run right through the fence and they'll strip these out. So you got to have an eye on them, keep them there. Daisy wheels work fine. Takes a special tool to tighten them up, and you want to make sure you got a good grip on it because it gets away from you. It could smack you in the jaw and it hurts. And here's a chain tightener here, smooth wire tightener, work pretty slick. How tight do we need to make our fence? With woven wire, most of them will say these tension curves, you want to flatten them out 1/3 to 1/2 of what they are when you pull that fence up. If you really want to get technical about it, they sell these devices here that you put on the fence. And this little spring right here is under the wire, and as you tighten it, it'll tell you how tight it is or how much tension you've got on it. These springs, if you tighten them 1 inch, they claim it's 150 pounds. I've seen some recommendations of 250 pounds of tension on high tensile, and boy, if you go that high, you better have good corner posts. That's a lot of tension, folks. 100 is probably where I would more likely stay at. If you got runs of greater than 600 foot, you want your ratchets or your tighteners in the middle of it, especially if it's not a straight run. Just put these up, a couple different new ratchets that I've come across. This one's got the bullnose insulator right on the end. And this one I really like. They're designed where you could put the wire and tie it off around here, but this one's designed, it's got a hole in the end right here. And you just slide the wire right through it. You don't have to cut it. It'd be a lot better if you've got electric connections on that wire. Gate placement, moving livestock. You don't want the gates in the center. You want them in the corners. Makes it a lot easier. This application here happens to be an alleyway here, so they've got 2 gates in, so whichever direction they're bringing the livestock, they can swing that gate open and help direct the livestock in there. Make sure you got them high enough to keep the pets off the top of your fence. Then we've all got that one that decided you've got a fence or a gate that you didn't put in correctly, so they're going to make their own gate. We've all had them before. Wildlife issues can be a problem. Coyotes probably our biggest one. We don't have bear here, but if you're raising specialty crops, deer can be an issue, and that's pretty expensive. Put in a 9-foot fence, but if you got high dollar crops, it pays. So just wrapping up here, in your manual and paddock design, there's some information there. Don't make sure you go in there and look at it, but look to your neighbors, look to your local producers, fencing companies, see what works for them. Hopefully one day we'll get back to doing field days, but Farm Science View, there's a lot of fence dealers there, different resources we have online. And then if you really get desperate, you can contact us, the extension. There's my contact information there. I said that jokingly, but be glad to help out and give you any information that I possibly can. Thank you.